helps global companies design, build, and operate global capability centers in talent-rich regions like India. The firm provides end-to-end services from talent acquisition and workspace design to compliance and payroll, from allowing enterprises to rapidly scale their in-house global teams. And with me is Vikram Ahuja. So great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So we're hearing global capability center as an emerging term. So explain what that is exactly.
Yeah, so in its most simplest form, Jane, a global capability center is essentially an office anywhere else in the world. Think of it as building an extension of your company in a talent-rich location with your employees, your company culture, controls, context, information. It's just the ability to hire people that bring a lot of strategic expertise in a market where there is abundance of talent. And what it's really trying to do is allowing companies to build the next version of themselves, to acquire strategic capabilities in-house and operate where the talent is, because today talent drives the world.
I see. So a company may be based in the US,
Yes.
but they maybe need IT or something like that somewhere else, but they don't need to be on site.
Yeah.
And that's what you help them do.
Yeah, and I think, today we're talking about a globally distributed workforce where work happens online, on the cloud. Every company today is a technology company under the disguise of whatever it is that they do. So fundamentally, what this model allows companies to do is access the best, the most relevant, the most specialized talent, wherever that talent is, to support their growth, ambitions, and vision. And in some ways, it also allows companies to really use the best of knowledge in markets where there is an abundance of peer-based density and so on, and then build teams where it allows them a lot of that strategic and competitive advantage.
And there's some big kind of macro trends that you're working with here, like talent shortages, rising costs in some parts of the world, geopolitical issues.
Yes.
So that's all, I guess, kind of helping your business grow and make sense for some people, right?
Yeah, I think we find ourselves in very interesting times. I think the world of work is changing around us now with artificial intelligence. Everything that we know about how we used to work and what the idea of work itself is being disrupted in real time. Geopolitical conflicts and the macros around that mean that companies need to be very wary of how they choose to do work and where the workforce is. And quite frankly, what's happening today is that the best company is not the one that has the best product or the one that has, the largest market share. I think history has taught us that incumbents often are the ones that lose out whenever there is disruption. And we're in the age of disruption. And the best companies are going to be the ones that have the best capabilities and the best intelligence. And that intelligence today is, human-led, but also AI-led or agent-led or autonomous, digitally empowered workforces that work jointly with humans. So for a company to succeed and thrive, you need to be able to build the most capable, the most skilled workforce, and you need to be where that talent force is. And what that means is then you have to access markets where there is an abundance of talent, whether that is, markets in India, whether that's countries like Mexico, Poland, the Philippines.
Yeah.
Right? Today, the best talent is globally distributed.
So where are you seeing, like, some of India, you mentioned Poland? I mean, are those kind of the hotspots for these global centers?
Yeah, so, historically, the word global capability centers implied that you had to be in a different location. Often the words that would be used are offshore, but today with technology and, everything happening digitally, there is no more onshore and offshore, right? And so when you look at capability centers, you can look at global locations. Markets like India today occupy about 60% of that workforce. So it's probably, the number one destination in terms of density of talent. But you've also got countries in Europe. So you've got, Portugal, you've got countries like Romania and Poland, which offer a lot of sovereignty and control for countries that are based in the EU.
Okay.
In North America, you've got countries like Mexico, you've got countries like Canada that are offering abundance of talent available in close locations. But I think the other big trend, which is, I think, very relevant to consider, is that capability centers are also being built domestically in the US. If you look at up-and-coming locations, cities like Nashville or Salt Lake City, Atlanta,
They're
all
energy or
absolutely
something like that. Yeah, it makes sense.
Talent, good quality of life. You're finding energy, you're finding governments rolling out incentives. And ultimately, this is about, can I build an office or a location where there is enough people where this makes it relevant for me to build a capability in.
Okay.
So a capability center can be anywhere where you have that abundance of talent, where you can actually build that as an owned center or an office for yourself.
Okay, interesting. You brought up AI, so it's
Yes.
and disruption.
Conversation of the moment,
Sure,
right?
every day, and it's reshaping industry. So, how are enterprises navigating that shift? How does AI play into global capability centers? Do you think it helps them accelerate to growth, or what do you say?
Yeah, and I think it's such an interesting time that we live in. The world of AI is changing so rapidly around us. So one thing that is becoming very obvious is that it is today a burning imperative for every company to do something in AI. I mean, our data shows something like 74% of all Fortune 500 CIOs have publicly called out investing in AI as one of their top 3 priorities. But if you look at the reality, you'll see less than 15% have actually shown publicly validated benefits of that AI in action. So we have 2 conflicting trends happening at the same time. On one side, there is an urgency to do more in this space. And on the other side, the questions are being asked on where is the ROI and where is the actual benefit. I think what enterprises are doing is realizing that today with AI, it's not a problem of the model or the platform. I think that those solutions are well established. You've got companies that are doing incredible work. Frontier labs are building at a pace that has never been seen before. That is not a problem. Where the real bottleneck is today in change management and in knowledge, right? Because AI in some ways is going to be the most disruptive force that any of us have seen in our lifetime. And it's going to impact all of us in terms of how we work, what work looks like, what a business looks like. I mean, there are one-person companies being built, right?
Doing coding and creating things that took
worth billions of dollars.
right.
There is equal measure of anxiety and ambition being created at the same time. So I think for most enterprises, the question is, how do you navigate this profoundly significant change management exercise? How do you bring your existing workforce to be ready for what's coming from an awareness and an acceptance standpoint? At the same time, how do you adopt technology at a faster pace to be able to be ready for what's coming? And so when we look at our context with global centers, there's more than 1,800 of them in market today. So when you look at the impact of AI in global enterprises, and from where we sit, we're looking at global centers as becoming an incredible launchpad for everything AI. And for a couple of reasons. One, it's allowing enterprises to tap into the kind of talent that can drive this transformation for them. So think about extremely skilled individuals that bring experience and expertise. Two, it also allows enterprises to, in some ways, sandbox or isolate parts of the organization that need to move into an AI-first way of working. So what a lot of our companies that we work with are doing is they're taking parts of their business and they're saying, how do I rethink this business from the grounds up? If it's retail, you're thinking about pricing, merchandising, design, customer experience. How do I think about this in an AI-first manner? And how do I do it in a location where there is both engineering and business sitting together and solving what should be the way work gets done without having to worry about what my legacy business does today? So this change management then happens at 2 levels. And in some ways, this is really going to be the future. Businesses are going to have to navigate how they work today and how work will happen in the future at the same time.
Yeah.
It's going to be a convergence and an incredibly complicated scenario to deal with.
Absolutely. Right.
And to do that in one location with, people sitting in the same room and fighting over what happens first is not going to work. So the way to do it is you have to rip the Band-Aid and almost take that leap of faith to say, this is how it's going to happen.
Somebody said AI is, we feel like we're driving down a road while it's being built right in front of us. I thought that was a great analogy because that's what it feels like. Oh, I hope I get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Someone mentioned, everyone says the change with AI is happening surely and very slowly. But in AI and the world of AI, slowly is also extremely fast.
Yeah,
right?
no, it definitely feels quick, I think. So now ANSR has helped companies build and scale these global capability centers for years. So what problems were enterprises trying to solve that traditional models couldn't fit? And how does ANSR kind of help them reach their goals?
Yeah. Yes, I think if you just sort of backtrack the last couple of decades, you'll see, every company has become a technology company, whether you're a bank or a retailer or a hospitality company or a pharma company, you're fundamentally using technology to power your product or your business. And so as technology has become more front and center, what companies have realized is that you can't have technology work as an outsourced function or as something that sits in the back end and offers support to the business. Today, it is the business. And that change has been extremely difficult for a lot of companies to navigate. If you look at retail, Amazon came in and took a lot of retailers out of business.
Sure.
And the ones that didn't react found themselves staring at a future that they were not ready for. They didn't have the skills, they didn't have the DNA, they didn't have the culture to innovate. The companies that have adopted have realized that for them to compete in the new world, they need to rewire themselves in terms of the kind of work they do, the kind of workforce they have, and in terms of the ambition that they set for themselves. So the core problem that we were really trying to solve is how do you help companies navigate this path of transformation and bring in capabilities that are so important to them? Whether that's related to technology, innovation, R&D, business expertise. For a lot of old school companies that were operating brick and mortar, today work was happening online. So now how do you bring in talent that understands the digital world and can help you move into that space? The biggest roadblock for companies to do that was availability and access to talent. You've got shortages of skilled labor in one location. And if there's one thing that the pandemic taught us is that you don't need to be in the same zip code for work to happen. So in some ways, the pandemic accelerated that path towards adoption of the model, but this was, a story being written far before that.
Yeah.
And so today, if you look at the key problems that companies face before they get into this model, which is I don't have the right people, I don't have the right skills, I'm too dependent on third-party vendors that I've outsourced a lot of my work to, and I can't own what I outsource. So how do I bring in control? How do I bring in ownership? How do I bring in accountability? And quite frankly, how do I compete with the companies that are being built, right here and right now? I see behind me Uber on the ticker. Uber completely changed the world of mobility and transportation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they did it in a matter of years when traditional industry is serving this space around for decades, right? So the pace of innovation is so quick that companies need to be able to move that fast.
Right.
And so what global centers have done today has allowed companies the ability to move at the speed of change. So now I'll put that in perspective. There's about 1,800 global capability centers employing about 2 million professionals. These professionals are employees of these companies. The closest analogy to this in more recent times, there have been conversations about this idea of rare earth minerals or rare earth assets. Right? And these are assets that are essentially used to build, batteries and phones and so on. And a few countries that control rare earth assets today or rare earth minerals essentially have leverage over global supply chain.
Yeah.
There is no more precious asset in the world than human capital, right? And so talent in its purest form is the best form of rare earth assets. And so for organizations that need to bring in this capability and this expertise, the way you do that is you find where talent is and you find yourselves there, which is what global centers do.
Now, how do you see the landscape evolving in this area?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is more and more clear. I think the question of building a global team is not a question of if, but it's a question of when. Something like 25% of Fortune 500 companies today have a global center. 90% of them have work that is being outsourced. So it's only a matter of time before they realize that you can't keep outsourcing capability. You have to insource capability and outsource work. So I believe that every global company will have a globally distributed team so that they can access the best of talent. I also believe with AI, the idea of work itself will change. Who you need in your company to do work will change. And you will now start looking at how do you combine human capital with, digitally empowered AI employees.
Yeah.
How does that work happen together? And the orchestration of that work will happen in a manner where it's decentralized and globally distributed. What I also expect will happen is as companies start accepting the fact that AI needs to be a part of their strategy, they will realize that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. most companies have a problem with information not being organized in a manner where it can be used by AI. So how do you aggregate data? How do you create layers of intelligence that AI can act on or drive from, right? And so there will be work that companies will now start doing to build that plumbing layer, to start stitching together how AI can come on top. And all of that is going to need experienced talent, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we see the global centers space will evolve.
Now, for companies that are thinking about a global capability center versus hiring in-house or doing something else, what are the things they should run through in their head to decide what makes sense for them?
Yeah, I think the biggest confusion that exists is a global center the same as outsourcing? Just because it happens in a different location, is it offshoring, work? And the truth is it's not. These are two sides of the same coin. In some ways, you outsource work that needs to be done by a specialized player. That's where you bring in a consultant or a managed service partners. But if it's work that is core to you, that adds competitive advantage, that brings you ownership and IP, that has to be work that you do internally. That has to be your employees doing the work. That has to be work that you retain, your data, your controls, your sovereignty. That has to be non-negotiable. And so as companies get into the space of deciding, what do I really need? I think the questions that we're hearing them ask is, where am I as a business? What part of my work today is under my control versus being given to a third party? What should I be owning? Where are my industry peers headed? Where is the market headed? What is the impact that AI will bring to me? And how do I have control over my own destiny? And the answer to some of those questions will converge on one simple truth. And that is that you need to own your capabilities, you need to own sovereignty, and you need to have control over what you're building and what you're taking to market. And you do that by building teams that can drive that sense of ownership and accountability. And so for that, you will build a globally distributed workplace where you have talent that can drive that ambition forward.
Okay, fascinating. And to see how all this change is taking place and the decentralization of it all and AI and how that plays into it. So, Vikram, thank you for coming and explaining ANSR.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great being here.